Okay. Explain these two paragraphs so many times. I really wonder if you're getting it or not. Okay. So they are telling that the children, as they are growing older, they have lost interest in kite flying and they have followed the swiftly changing competitive trend that the surrounding world was following. People were no longer interested in kite flying and they were busy in their earning for their living. They were busy in buying tickets for a cinema instead of buying kites, and plus there were no grounds, open spaces left because of the construction which was occurring all over. Both were taken for granted, permanent fixtures that were of no concern to the raucous, sweating mass of humanity that surrounded them. No longer did people gather under the banyan tree to discuss their problems and their plans. Only in the summer months did a few shelter from the fierce sun. So they are telling you that with the changing heartlessness all around, the humanity had lost its touch. People no longer were worried about others, were concerned about others, neither did they thought about anyone other than their own priorities. So this trend was changing the whole scenario. And earlier in the free time, there were gossip sessions near and around the banyan tree where people would sit down and for hours they used to talk. Now it hardly happens. People are busy for earning their own livelihood and they do not have time to sit all around. But there was the boy, his grandson. It was good for Mahmud's son, worked close by, for it gladdened the old man's heart to watch the small boy at play in the winter sunshine, growing under his eyes like a young and well nourished sapling, putting forth leaves each day. There is a great affinity between trees and men. So now, this young boy called Ali, who was the grandson of Mahmud had an opportunity to see his grandson growing, and this gave him such a lot of pleasure. Why? Because his son, Mahmood's son, used to work in a local garage and he lived nearby. That means the grandson had a chance to be close to Mahmood, and in this way, Mahmood had a chance to keep a quick eye and a firm eye always at his grandson, and keep him under his eyes and have a close look and enjoy seeing the boy grow each day. And then the writer Ruskin Bond tells us that uh, he compares Ali, the grandson, with a young plant, young sapling, with proper nourishment and well looking after. He was growing each day. And the writer also says that there's great similarity between the trees and the men, just as the trees from a young sapling grow, give out lovely green leaves, and then finally they wither away and die. In the same way, a man who's born as a young child, full of energy, full of zeal, when it grows, reaches its youth, and then gradually fades away and dies. We grow at much the same pace if we are not hurt or starved or cut down. In our youth, we are resplendent creatures, and in our declining years, we stoop a little. We remember, we stretch out brittle limbs in the sun, and then with a sigh, we shed our last leaves. So now he compares them further. He says, just as a tree, a person grows up if he's looked after, if he's not hurt, if he's not cut down, just as a tree, if it is looked after and uh, fertile, then it grows into a youth which is good enough, which is attractive enough for others. And then in the youth, after the youth, the young sapling which has reached its youth, it stretches out, it looks bright, it looks energetic, Then finally, with their brittle limbs, that means as the uh, uh, what do you call it? The branches of a tree, they wither, the leaves fall, and finally, even the last leaf is shed off. That means one reaches its death. Mahmud was like the banyan, his hands gnarled and twisted like the roots of the ancient tree. So now here the writer compares Mahmud to be the old banyan tree, which had now reached its uh, full bloom and is now withering away gradually. It's now reaching its end. So he compared Mahmud with the roots of tree which are now twisted, which have now with age have withered. Okay, and he compares Ali and he says that he is like a young mimosa planted at the end of the courtyard. In 2 years, both he and the tree would acquire the strength and confidence of their early youth. So he says that Ali is the young mimosa plant right now, which is uh, cultivated on the courtyard, which has been put up on the courtyard, and gradually both the tree and Ali in the coming years would gain strength and will have confidence enough for the early youth to grow up quickly. Now, come to the next paragraph, which is very, very important. The voices in the street grew fainter, and Mahmoud wondered if he was going to fall asleep and dream, as he so often did, of a kite so beautiful and powerful that it would resemble the great white bird of the Hindus, Garuna, God Vishnu's famous steed. He would like to make a wonderful new kite for little Ali. He had nothing else to leave the boy. So now, as Mahmoud lies there on the cot, finally it appears to him as if the voices which were earlier audible were now turning fainter, and Ali, in his deep thoughts, just sleeping idly, thinks that as if he's going to go for a long sleep and he's about to dream. And in his dream, he would see a white bird which stretches out its wings, and that bird resembles the Garun, the which is said to be a chariot of Lord Vishnu in Hindu mythology. Lord Vishnu sits on this and Garun and uses it as his vehicle. So he would like to make a white kite or a kite resembling Garun. It's a kind of a bird, and since he had nothing else to leave for the boy, he would do that. Now, just before death, in old age, people dream of their death. They are well aware in advance about their death. So he just thinks in his dreams, just as he is going to for a long journey, and before that, he prefers that he would make in his dream a white kite like that of a Garun bird, which is a vehicle of the Lord Vishnu in Hindu mythology. He heard Ali's voice in the distance, but did not realize that the boy was calling him. The voice seemed to come from very far away. Now, the boy Ali was just next to Mahmoud. He was very close, next to the cot where he sat, and he was calling out his grandfather's name again and again that he should get up. But on the contrary, on the other hand, Mahmoud could hear only a faint call. Why? Because he was reaching his end and maybe all the senses were dying out. So for him, it appeared as if the voice was coming from a distance. Ali was at the courtyard door asking his mother had as asking if his mother had as yet returned from the bazaar. When Mahmood did not answer, the boy came forward repeating his question. The sunlight was slanting across the old man's head, and a small white butterfly rested on his flowing beard. Mahmood was silent, and when Ali put his small brown hand on the old man's shoulder, he met with no response. The boy heard a faint sound like the rubbing of marbles in his pocket. So now Ali, who was all about to go and play, he was looking for his mother, and from the courtyard end he called out if grandfather was aware where his mother was. But when Mahmoud did not answer, he came closer to him and kept repeating and asking where his Ali's mother was. To this, when he did not get the response, he came closer and sat down. And when he sat down, he saw that the sunlight was falling on his beard in a slanting way. That means the sun was also setting. Now, all this, the sunset, the the dream in which he sees Garun or a white bird, and then as the voices are also fading, all these indicate that Mahmud was reaching his end. He was meeting his end. He was about to die. And when there was no response, the boy could only hear a faint sound. The faint sound was that of a your last breath tea. Okay, it was just like the rubbing of the marbles in his pocket. Now, the sound was compared here with the rubbing of the marbles. Marbles are, in Hindi, we call them kancha. I don't know if you've seen kancha because nobody plays it now. Nobody plays with marbles. But then Ali had plenty of marbles in his pocket, and it was just as if the sound of the rubbing of the marbles, that sound he could hear from his grandfather's throat. He could not answer. That means he was just taking his last breath. Suddenly, afraid, Ali turned and moved to the door and then ran down the street shouting for his mother. The butterfly left the old man's beard and flew through the mimosa tree, and a sudden gust of wind caught the torn kite and lifted it in the air, carrying it far above the struggling city into the blind blue sky. Now, in the previous paragraph, I forgot to tell you and explain you this small little portion. Now, the sunlight which was falling slantingly could make the beard uh, be seen as a shiny thing, and there he could see that a white butterfly was resting on the beard which was flowing. And as he kept calling, there was no response. And as gradually Mahmoud died, he was suddenly, this Ali, he was scared. And so he turned and moved to the door. Ali started moving and then he ran down the street shouting for his mother. Now, in the contrary, the last paragraph shows us the death of Mahmoud, and it is symbolized through a butterfly. That the butterfly, it just flew away and it sat on the young mimosa plant. That means the old cycle of life and death. Old die and the young carry on, and then they also grow and then reach their youth, then further grow, reach their old age, and then die. So this cycle of being born, reaching the youth, and meeting the end is a circulatory process, is an all in all round process. So, just as the earlier that butterfly sat on that old man who died, and the flying of the butterfly and reaching the mimosa tree, which was a young plant, shows that now the process of cycle has begun, and now Ali is soon will attain the youth and he will grow into a young man. And then there was a sudden gust of wind which made that stuck kite, which had got stuck earlier, you remember, in the opening paragraph where it got stuck in the banyan tree, and because of which Ali had come running to his grandfather. It all of a sudden got lifted up through that gust of wind and it moved away into the blind blue sky. That means endless sky. This shows that the soul has left the body and it has started moving to reunite with God. So now this is the lovely lesson. We have come to an end of it. Please do read the last part. That means this particular last two pages are very important. Why? Because throughout you must have seen how the comparisons were made earlier And each line is very important. Why? Because most of the times reference to context comes from these particular lines. So make sure you read this part, and if you come across any problem, please do let me know. And I never wanted a break in the call. That is